I came into psychosynthesis about 25 years ago when I first met my husband, and he had Assagioli's book, Transpersonal Development, and I just devoured it. And it just felt, oh, this is my story. This is my life. And how does he know my life so well? And I just fell in love with it. Well, the fact that it contains a spiritual dimension to the human psyche,
Yeah.
and that he so beautifully described transpersonal experiences, which I'd had in my life and didn't really know what to do with.
But could you say something about this? It was actually some kind of a spiritual awakening process you have been through, or I guess so.
Just say one thing, like I've seen angels, and that's his major spiritual philosophy, is this synthesis of the infinite with the finite. He even says himself, that is what he's doing in all his writing. It's the infinite of the self. Self has
Yes,
an infinite number of possibilities, and yet it wants to be expressed through our two hands and our voice,
exactly.
our heart.
Yeah. Hi, Catherine, and welcome to Psychosynthesis Conversation.
Thank you, Kenneth. It's lovely to be here.
Yes, and it's so lovely to have you here. I've been following your work for quite some while. I think the first time I saw something from you was when I read your book, Freedom in Jail, a marvelous story of the imprisonment of Roberto Assagioli just before the Second World War. But you have been quite active with blogs and teachings, webinars. So I'm so thrilled to have you here today and dive into how it all started. So perhaps we could say something about, or you could tell us your story, how you came into psychosynthesis.
Thanks, Kenneth. It's the admiration is mutual. I've been also following your publications and many articles and translations, and I appreciate them all, having
Thank
them
you.
access to them all. So I came into psychosynthesis about 25 years ago when I first met my husband, and he had Assagioli's book, Transpersonal Development, and I just devoured it. And it just felt, oh, this is my story. This is my life. And how does he know my life so well? And I just fell in love with it and started reading anything I could get my hands on, written by Assagioli.
Mm.
And it just went off from there. I ended up studying at the Institute of Psychosynthesis in London, and
Oh.
uh, and then just continued writing and research and publishing as much as I could. Yeah.
Did you live in London at that time, or did you? I know you live in Italy now.
Well, that's it. I started in Italy, and then we were in the process of moving to Northern Europe. So then I was a year in the Netherlands, and then I moved to Germany. So I was in three countries, plus traveling to London back and forth. Yeah,
Okay,
it
great.
was.
Was there something? Of course, there was something, but if you should tell a bit about what it was about psychosynthesis that spoke so dearly to your heart, was there anything? Was it the egg diagram? Was it the concept of synthesis, or what was it that resonated so deeply with you?
Well, the fact that it contains a spiritual dimension to the human psyche,
Yeah.
and that he so beautifully described transpersonal experiences,
Mm,
which I'd had in my life and didn't really know what to do with. Didn't know exactly, in a psychological sense, how to explain it or how to cope with it or how to acknowledge it. And
mm,
so that to me was deeply personal and deeply spiritual, and helped explain a lot of things that I couldn't fully understand
mm.
before I found psychosynthesis.
Okay, yes, that really makes sense. So, before you encountered psychosynthesis, were you into other traditions, spiritual traditions, or?
Many, the journey has been long and
Mm,
meandering. Yeah.
mm,
Because well, I I lived in Japan for 2 years and I studied tea ceremony
mm,
when also later. So that I entered into, of course, the whole Zen Buddhist tradition. And then I was also visiting Shinto shrines. And I mean, I would go and, turn the Tibetan prayer wheels. I went to India and bathed in the Ganges. I mean, I was a real seeker, but I
mm,
didn't have a real deep connection to anything
mm.
particular. I was constantly seeking
Yeah.
truth, I'd say,
Mm,
in my life. And then, and what happened was I read Joseph Campbell's book, The Hero of a Thousand Faces. And in that book, he says Westerners kind of don't look at the mystical part of the Christian tradition.
mm,
Tend to go to the Eastern traditions. And yet it's much easier for a Westerner in some ways to delve more deeply into mysticism through the Western traditions. And then it really struck me because I guess then I just imagined like all my Catholic deceased relatives, my grandmothers and grandfathers and
mm,
uncles in heaven going, yeah, what, Catherine, what are you doing? Where are you going? What are you
mm.
doing? And then I started a path started exploring my Christian roots. And I'd say now, for many years, I've been a Christian
Mm.
practicing. I call myself a almost good Catholic. So
Well,
that's where I'm at now. So
yeah.
yeah.
But were you brought up as a Catholic?
Yeah, I was
Okay.
brought up Catholic and
Yes.
lost my faith in the Roman catacombs of all places when I was
Mm.
like 20, 22. And then I was really lost for my 20s and my 20s. And then in my 30s, 40s, started searching again.
Yeah.
In it.
And if you could you say something about the spiritual experiences you had, and did they just came out of the blue, or were they induced by meditation or rituals you did? Because many people have these types of experiences, but also have very difficulties about explaining what it is, because very often it's such a different reality that yeah, it's hard to put language to it. But could you say something about this? It was actually some kind of a spiritual awakening process you have been through, or I guess so.
Yeah, well, that's why I guess the Transpersonal Development book by Assagioli, he explains it so beautifully.
Yeah.
And it's very simple in many ways, but then so mysterious
Mm,
in other ways. And yeah, well, I hesitate to talk about them because it can cause people some difficulties. And I hesitate to talk about exactly what happened. But
mm,
I mean, I've heard, okay, I'll just say one thing. Like I've seen angels, I've heard angels, and that's just like one
yeah.
thing. I
Yeah.
notice if I talk about these things, people get a little,
I know on my channel I talk a lot about it. I also had these encounters, and I know many people have had it. Actually, what I just recently interviewed Michael Linfield from Meditation Mount, and at the age of 12 or 13, he encountered an angelic presence that, yeah, did some magic to him, so he calmed his nervous system. And something that thousands of people encounter. So I remember vividly at the full moon in May, the Buddha's full moon, had a terrible time, with a lot of emotional upheaval. And then just at this precise minute of the full moon, there came angelic present, and it said to me it was a dakini, so something related to the Buddhist tradition, and I had never encountered such a being before, and it was non-human, that's for sure. When I looked at it, standing just in front of my eyes, and there was not a human, but it told me that it was there for my protection. And the days after, emotional troubles were completely gone. There was just this totally healing process by that encounter. So I think, yeah, for me, that's one of my values, that people need to know that they are not crazy if they have such an encounter. That is actually part of, yeah, reality, I would say.
Yeah, I remember going into when I was in the studying psychosynthesis in London and going into my therapist and saying, explaining one of these instances, and I was like, oh, oh my God, what did this has happened to me? And she just looked at me like, yeah. Like she really settled me down, like, yeah, it's normal,
Yes,
relax. Because yeah, it can be quite overwhelming and amazing, and
yes,
the agony and the ecstasy of life
yeah.
all in one. Yeah.
Okay, so you started your journey in psychosynthesis. By then, did you went through the counselor program, or you also did an
Counselor
MA?
counselor program.
Okay, what were you wrote a thesis, and what was that about?
That was on multiculturalism and using
Okay.
psychosynthesis techniques to help foreign students. I was working with many foreign students in the
Ah,
Netherlands, and
yes.
I wrote about how psychosynthesis techniques can reduce culture shock.
Okay. And was that something also from your own personal background? You have been around many different cultures, so
Yeah, of course.
since and what year did you graduate from the institute?
2012.
Okay.
Yeah, I think
A-
2012. Yeah,
Around that. So have you been working as a psychotherapist since then? And
a bit. I'm more of a writer and researcher.
yeah, you just can come around your written productions, you're the Freedom of Jail, then was that your first book?
Well, it's not really my book, it's Assagioli's book.
Okay,
And
yes, but you
I
were the editor.
I I I was the messenger, I guess.
Okay, yes,
Yes, so that was well, I did publish my thesis, and then that was the book. Then worth the cat with the Fonte, oh dear, the Casa Sajoli, Grupo alla Fonte, they
oh,
published
yes.
Freedom in Jail. Yes.
And you have just recently published another book, or no, translated an Italian book to English,
Creating Harmony in Life.
exactly,
So
yes,
then Grupo Elefante, they asked me to translate Assagioli's first book.
yeah,
I'm sure collection of lessons that he gave.
yeah,
And so I did that for them, Creating Harmony in Life. Yeah, it's a beautiful
okay.
book, I think.
So I understand you are a writer and you dive into different subjects. And as far as I know, you have also written about Tolstoy. And is that me mistaking?
Well, that's very intuitive of you, Kenneth, because I have written about Tolstoy, but it hasn't been published yet.
Okay.
So there you go.
Okay,
Something.
we look forward to that then. Uh, but the main subject that you want to dive deep in today is Rabindranath Tagore, or could pronounce his name. Okay, yes. Why is he such an interesting person to know about?
Yeah, that was another kind of falling into just happened to me. I was invited to speak at a conference and on psychosynthesis and literature. And I knew that Assagioli had met Tagore in 1926 when Tagore visited Italy. And I knew that Assagioli also had written about Tagore. And so I started reading about Tagore and reading his phenomenal amount of work that he has produced. And I just fell in love with Tagore. And then one thing led to I wrote the paper for this conference, and it was first published in Italian, and then I found a publisher in India for an English translation of the same paper. And from there, I just fell in love with this amazing person who Assagioli said was a complete picture of psychosynthesis. And so I started writing a book on Tagore and psychosynthesis. And it's just been so fascinating and so rewarding and such a joy.
And is that published?
No, that's under review. I had the contract with Routledge, which is a huge scholarly publishing house. And so someone has to review what I wrote to make sure it's not nonsense. So it's under review at the moment.
Okay.
Hopefully, being next year, it gets published.
So if we should dive a bit into the meeting between Assagioli and Tagore, when did that happen?
That happened in 1926. Tagore was invited. This is what's so fascinating about the story is he came as a guest of Mussolini. And so here you have this humanist, this spiritual prophet, if you will.
Yeah.
And this Mussolini was just grabbed his dictatorial power at that moment. At the time, it was relatively new. And he was actually quite popular with other world leaders, and the King of England came to visit him. And so he hadn't gone off the deep end yet, but there were some terrible things happening at the time in Italy. And anyway, so Tagore came as Mussolini's guest, and Assagioli, this is kind of an interesting, he also came invited by the Sanskrit scholar Carlo Formicki, and Assagioli was a colleague of Formicki's through the Theosophical League.
Yes.
And so Assagioli was invited. I don't know exactly how it happened, but he was second in line for translating for Tagore on his tour in Italy. Yeah.
And how did the meeting went? Do we have any records of Assagioli's impression of Tagore?
Well, he did write impressions of Tagore's visit to Italy. So, which is, not very, I don't know, Assagioli was not, that's why I fell in love with Freedom in Jail, because he was very intimate in those writings, and his writings aren't that intimate. You don't really get deep inside what is Assagioli personally thinking. So what he felt Tagore was a mystic. He felt Tagore was a person who had achieved psychosynthesis. On a personal level, I don't know what he thought. Yeah.
No. But if we should turn our attention toward Tagore, I know almost nothing about him except through Aurobindo. There was some exchange, and they were both very famous at that time. And I know Tagore was writing also a poem about Aurobindo, and Aurobindo is one of my great gurus, you could say, or I really resonate with how he sent his integral yoga and also his focus on synthesis. So if we should dive into the man Tagore, what is he? He's a poet, but he's also a mystic. So what's his message, and why is he an important person to dive into?
Okay, I need to qualify. He never wanted to be called a mystic.
Ah,
He didn't want to be called that, but other
no,
people obviously Assagioli included,
yeah.
called him that. But Tagore never wanted to be called that. He was incredibly prolific in his writings and so far-sighted. I mean, you read his work now, and he's talking to us today. He wrote a whole book on nationalism. He was way ahead of the time with environmental issues. He was not only a poet, but he wrote plays, and he wrote over 2,000 songs.
Wow.
And two of his songs are national anthems, even though he was against nationalism. Ironically, the national anthem of India and Bengali is Bangladesh are songs by Tagore. So he was amazing. He wrote letters and beautiful reflections, and everyone should read Tagore because he's really speaking to us today, and he's so, and yeah, with all that he has to say, he's been completely forgotten. And he was a beautiful man. He knew how to deal with polarities. He was able to cope really beautifully with all kinds of polarities that would come into his life. For instance, I write about this in a book where his daughter, who was 12, was dying of tuberculosis, and the doctors recommend that she go into the Himalaya. So he accompanied her into the mountains, carrying her at times for miles to where we were going to be. And he took care of her and was at her side until her death at 12, 13 years of age. And while he was doing that, he was writing the most beautiful poetry for children. Out of this heartbreaking, sorrowful experience of his daughter, he had 5 children, 3 of whom died in childhood. He was able to create a children's poetry book that is just stunning.
So
And
in some way you could say, this is something Assagioli speaks a lot about, the ability to transmute our personal pains into creative expression. It was perhaps this what he was doing.
yeah, I'm sure that's what he was doing. And he was he was super expert at this kind of synthesizing polarity. Real, in all his writing, you see it. And that's his major spiritual philosophy, is this synthesis of the infinite with the finite. He even says himself that is what he's doing in all his writing.
Yes.
So stunning when you start looking at it.
So in some way that could perhaps be compared to Assagioli's understanding of the self as both universal and individual. That there is this, because the individual is in some way finite and the universal is eternity.
Well, I see it more as the I,
Yes,
the authentic true self that we have,
yes,
we're becoming all the time,
yes.
and the higher self, which
Okay,
is inside the human psyche and outside as well. Yeah.
yes,
So it's the infinite of the self. The self has
yes,
an infinite number of possibilities, and yet it wants to be expressed through our 2 hands and our voice,
exactly.
our heart.
Yeah.
This is how I see it, the infinite and the finite.
Yeah, but I really relate to that, and you could speak about the higher self as the transcendent self, the transcendent nature of us, and the finite self is the personal I, that is the embodied self, that is here now in this very moment. And I think that is a very unique expression. I know Aurobindo is also speaking about exactly this universality and individuality. And of course, there are many ways to conceptualize it and also experience it. But I also, as far as I read some of your article, and as far as I could see, Tagore was also in some way bringing East and West together. And at that time, we have Ramakrishna, we have Vivekananda, we have Aurobindo, and in some way these three had a new message about synthesis, about, it's not about transcending and get out of the world, it's about bringing spirit into this world. And it sounds like Tagore was of the same kind.
Yes, and he practiced it because he formed this university. He actually founded 3 schools in India, and last was a university, Vishnu Bharata, and their goal was to bring East and Western thought together, and also have Western scholars come and live amongst the students, the Indian population. And also he wanted to, first and foremost, unite Indian people because of the diversity just alone in India.
Oh, yes.
And then bring in West and East. So he was very, very interested in bringing people together, allowing them to be in all their diversity, but all in one nest, he'd say, to a home in one nest. And it worked very hard for it. He called it his biggest treasure, this university. And he worked very hard to maintain it, and wasn't an administrator. He wasn't, he kind of hated all that stuff that he had to do, but he did it out of, I think he was called by higher self.
Yeah.
To found these schools.
Yeah.
And he did his best to do so, yeah.
And I think it's important to recall that perhaps his major work was before Indian independence. They got their independence was in 49 or 48 or something like that. So he worked in a culture that was for many years dominated by the British. So where did he stand in that big question where, Aurobindo was a revolutionary? He really worked for Indians' independence, and he was and he was jailed for that cause. And we also have Gandhi. And where was he in? Did he argue for home rule, or was it pure independence? Do you know something about where he stands on that question?
No, he wanted independence. Pure
Okay.
independence. But he was not a politician. He was not interested in becoming political.
No.
He was very active in the early part of the last century when Bengal was undergoing major turmoil, and he was very active in that. And then when he saw the Hindi people and the Muslim people fighting each other, he said, no, I'm interested in this world, really. And so he took a step back from politics. But he also, grew up in what's called the Bengali Renaissance. And so under British rule, of course, he was educated in Western literature and yeah. So he was very familiar with the West and literature and the music, and he spent time in England when he was in his 20s. He was supposed to become a lawyer, but that didn't work out. No. He never graduated from school.
Okay.
Yeah, that's partly why he started his first school for his children.
Okay.
Because he could not stand being cooped up in a classroom. And, the terrible, strict rules that we'd have had. And also he felt it was absurd for Bengali children to have to learn their lessons in English. So he started a school for his own children, and that grew as well, many different schoolboys. And he was one of the first in Asia to have co-ed education, 1909. I mean, he was incredible. He was so amazing, really.
Yeah.
I think.
Yeah, and I think it's also important to recall that there was a great revival of the different branches of Hinduism and Buddhism, because at least around the early 90s, 1910, or, there was a lot of focus on reviving or bringing vitality into Hinduism, because Christianity was so dogmatic and called Hinduism superstition. So many Indians believe that the great treasure, that the great culture that they were born into was second class. And then these great thinkers like Vivekananda, Ramakrishna, and all the others, they revived the old culture, and perhaps Tagore was part of that.
Well, his father was, of course, very famous revivalist of, or revisionist, I should say, revisionist of the Hindu with the Brahma Shama, if I'm saying that right, and which also so anyway, his father was quite famous and a master and considered a Marikesh, and but Tagore, he was later in life, like in his 70s, he wrote his own, he's distant from all these religions, and he actually, what's fascinating about him, like Assagioli, who came up with psychosynthesis out of his many readings and his life experiences, Tagore also came up with his own religion. He called it the religion of man, which was completely different from, he's drawing on all the Indian sources and the Vedas and Upanishads, and he came up with his own belief system and his own model of what man's religion is, which is very deeply connected to this relationship. Relationship was really key between the infinite and the finite.
Yes.
It's so key, this relationship. The infinite is longing to express itself. And so it's seeking us all the time to, you can see it in every flower and every, Tagore really believed in nature being a vehicle to connecting to this creative power within us as well. Yeah.
So that's, we could call it divine immanence, and it's the same, the same idea in psychosynthesis that the transpersonal self or higher self projects the I, and what I've learned through Aurobindo is that this embodied I is connected in the heart center as the Purusha, vital Purusha, but also, in the head center. And this is us as observer. So in our heart center, we have something that longs for the divine, longs to reconnect, and always, make us seek, you could call it our divine homeland. And we can find this same idea in psychosynthesis and Tagore, Aurobindo. And I think it's so important to have both these ideas, that there is a transcendent part that we can reconnect with, but it's also very close. This divinity is embodied, is embedded within the very fiber of our physical body. It's like a seed that we can bring forward so it can actually become a flame, and it works to spiritualize our personality from within. It's not something above, it's something that is within us, embodied.
Yes, but it's always connected to.
Yes, exactly.
And it sounds very easy, but it's a lot of getting rid of all the obstacles all the barriers that are preventing us from receiving the love
definitely
that is coming down.
I think many people intuitively register it, that my meditation practice started in 88, and I just got a very simple advice. You have a sun in your heart center. I didn't know anything about meditation, but it was a very simple instruction. You have a sun in your heart center, and you can connect with it and tune into different qualities: love, acceptance, trust, whatever you want. Just let this sun shine. And I'm a very practical person, and it was just speaking so loud to me. So I started my meditation practice by just sitting down and meditating on that sun every day. And gradually you start feeling the sun, you start feeling the qualities that you are meditating on. So you don't need to be very advanced in order to connect with that. Of course, you need to be disciplined, like when you want to start playing an instrument. And of course, when you start playing the guitar, you cannot play very good. And the same applies to meditation. When you start doing the exercise, perhaps you will experience nothing. But doing it over and over and again, you gradually bring that forth that is already inside.
That's the will, isn't it?
Yeah,
That's
exactly.
an act of will. Yeah,
Yes.
mustn't forget the will when you're talking about Assagioli.
No,
It's
definitely not.
essential.
How about the will and Tagore? Is that something
Yeah, he wrote a lot about freedom and
mm,
freedom within limits and
mm,
the need how and also around suffering and freedom. And yes, of course, he talks about discipline and the will of God, if you will.
mm,
And yeah, well, Assagioli is so that's really the main focus of Assagioli, at least in the
yeah,
work that we have of his.
yeah.
Of course, you don't see this in really many other spiritual areas. This
No, I agree.
so I do in one of the chapters talk about the first chapter in the book actually goes through the psychosynthesis different concepts and then shows how they are reflected in Tagore's writings
Mm,
and life.
okay.
Some areas were of course more evident. I mean, it's difficult because I don't have him to talk to, so I just have to read what he's written, mostly letters
Yeah.
to people because that, of course, more intimate. But yes, he absolutely believed in the call of the self, the will of the self calling, and our
Mm,
will to refuse or to accept, and need for discipline and the need for determination and
mm,
choices that we make every
mm,
day. Yeah.
mm. If you should pick a point of, or a couple of points of a book, something that you think is very relevant and essential for the modern human being, what is the message that you think resonates deeply in his work and that you want to bring out to a larger audience through your book?
Yeah, that's the idea of the infinite in relationship with the finite. I think
Mm,
it's
yeah.
it's so missing, and often you have the infinite, like you're just he was against asceticism.
Yes.
He really didn't believe in it, and he believed that the only real way to a full spiritual life is through life. God gives us life. So
Yes.
we need to live it and be in it and
Mm,
experience it and learn from it. And so this not disconnected, you can't disconnect this.
mm,
And it's in all his, he even said it was on all his writings. And so
mm,
it's not always evident, but so that makes it interesting to kind of see where it might be hidden,
mm,
but very much a part of who he was and what he believed in.
mm.
And I think psychosynthesis as well. That's why the I-self connection.
Yes.
It's all about that,
Yeah.
aligning our will and consciousness with the will and consciousness of the higher self.
Yes.
And that's the
Definitely.
ticket. That's the ticket. That's what
Yes.
we're.
Yes.
And that's had a lot in common in that
Mm,
in regard. Yeah. I don't know how much time we have, but I did pick out a poem that I thought was really relevant. I didn't mention that Tagore won the Nobel Prize of Literature in 1913.
oh, yes.
Yes, and that needs, of course, to be mentioned.
Yeah.
He was the first Asian to win the prize, and
Okay. Yeah.
he won it basically on one book of a translation of poems
Mm,
that he Gitanjali song offerings. And this is a poem from Gitanjali. And I think it's fairly famous. You can easily find it online. But I think it might speak to many people, and it's the state of the world and the nations that we have. So if you don't mind, I'd like to read it. It's very short.
You're welcome.
Okay. Where the mind is without fear and the head is held high, where knowledge is free, where the world has not been broken up into fragments by narrow domestic walls, where words come out from the depth of truth, where tireless striving stretches its arms towards perfection, where the clear stream of reason has not lost its way into the dreary desert sand of dead habit, where the mind is led forward by thee into ever-widening thought and action, into that heaven of freedom, my Father, let my country awake.
It's hard not to put it in relation to the movement for independence of India. It's almost like a cry of the soul of India for freedom and independence.
Yes, he wrote it for that purpose, but I think it speaks to a lot of us today.
Yes, definitely. And freedom is the call of the self. We have to liberate us from all these attachment and stupid ideas we are identified with. I think this was a very beautiful end note, and I think it's a high note we can stop this conversation with. So thank you very much, Catherine. It has been a pleasure to listen to you, and I will continue follow your work. And yeah, all the best to you.
Thank you, Kenneth, and God bless you in your work as well.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye.